Hey, welcome to the Votary podcast. We're a team of filmmakers based in New England who are passionate about storytelling. We talk about the impact that stories have in every part of our lives, from business to culture and everything in between. Thanks for joining us.
All right, here we go. Votary Podcast, Episode 8, the first episode of the year 2021. Woo. First episode in 2 months almost?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Been a little while. We had holidays and all those excuses to not have produced one in a while. But we have a newfound commitment to try and release a new podcast at least every other week, if not more often.
That's right.
And
every day, right?
every other week.
Okay.
And we have our very first guest of the year, a relatively new friend of ours, Andi Lipo. Welcome.
Howdy.
Woo!
Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Howdy. Honored.
We have Jono here, Jed, and of course Cody. Jamin's producing. And we have no real clear agenda. We just wanted to introduce Andi, ask him a bunch of questions, have him introduce his story and his experience as a filmmaker. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your journey as a filmmaker?
Okay. So I grew up in Worcester, right by Worcester State University. I never, ever thought I would get into filmmaking, ever. Most of my time, I thought I was going to be skateboarding. That's what I did for 90% of my childhood. Every day. And then, we would make skate films and that kind of thing, but it was never something that I ever really considered. Until I got to film school, which was a colossal waste of money. That was one of the biggest kind of driving forces that changed my perspective a little bit. But leading up until then, I never, ever really did anything from a film perspective. I always wrote, I always did, I always loved to draw. I'd love to do things like that, just pretty much anything artistic. And then I got into Boston University. And once that happened, I got into their general program. And it's called CGS, College of General Studies. And it's crayons, glues, and scissors is what people call it, right? Because it's high school 2.0. So that's just for people who don't know what they want to do. And, by sophomore year, they're handing out the forms and it's like, okay, you have to declare a major now. And I still hadn't really gone in any particular direction. And I had a buddy who kept trying to push me into film and he was going to do it and he was set and he wanted to become a screenwriter. And right then and there, that's how I declared my major. I had taken a film class or two, but it was really quite useless and didn't necessarily spark anything in me. And then I started the film program and I went from doing relatively awful my freshman and sophomore year in terms of GPA to just going to this really easy film program and kind of turning it all around. And then after that, I stuck around Boston for about a year and there was no work. I guess I didn't really know how to get the work is a better way to put it. You kind of leave school and then it's like, okay, in Boston, what do? You can go work at a camera house. You can reach out to the production companies. You can do all the kind of corporate stuff. And I didn't really know how to access or reach out to any of that. I wasn't really given the resources coming out of school.
What year was that?
2013. And I didn't know about looking for jobs online, if I'm being totally honest. I didn't know how to do that. And there wasn't much production out here. So, I remember one guy I worked for, he kept his lenses in socks, and just like a grocery bag going to set. And we were doing these like kind of lame corporate things that he was just kind of phoning in while he was there. I was the PA, but I could tell. So after that, I decided a move was necessary. And I had a friend of mine who was also trying to move to California. So we packed, I think, a week after I heard that, we packed our things, loaded up the car, drove to San Francisco first. I don't know why. Didn't have a good reason. Was just kind of looking for the next thing. And so we got to San Francisco. We were in an Airbnb. We were sharing a bedroom, 2 dudes. Just, everything was kind of in that bedroom for a month. And I was just that's when I started looking for jobs online, and I found a job north of San Francisco teaching a film school for kids. It was like kids age 6 to 10. So I did that for 3 months, and it was a solid paycheck, and it was fun to work with the kids, and it was eye-opening because a lot of the kids up there, they go to different types of schooling. They don't all just go to traditional school, right? They have homeschooling, they have regular public schools, and then some of them just didn't go to school at all, right? One kid told me he had spent a year on a yacht with his family, and he was getting, homeschooled, and that he was on a boat for an entire year. And so that really opened my eyes to just the education system in California in general, and kind of the one thing I did take away there, I think, was how much of an impact the different forms of education had on these kids, right? So some of these kids that were homeschooled were like leaders for sure, right? They were leaders, because they've probably gotten a lot of attention, and they were the ones taking charge of these groups. You had the kid that said he was on a yacht for a year, and he, didn't have really any fundamentals. And so I saw all these different things with these kids.
Probably a good swimmer, though.
No, he was on the yacht, not in the water.
Yeah, and
He's
so
getting dragged behind the boat.
yeah.
Go on.
It's fine. After that, that was 3 months, and then I decided I had to move to. I was applying for jobs throughout the entire time. I got a job in New York City, or a PA gig at a post house in New York City. And so I was like, okay, I'm going back cross country. So I had loaded my stuff, and I was going to go. And then right before I had started to drive, I called a buddy who lived in Los Angeles, and he said, no, don't do that. Come to LA, give this a chance first. And so instead of going to New York City, I drove down to LA. And we, 2 weeks into that, started an LLC together, and we're going to make a production company and films without any real experience or any clue. I was maintaining a full-time job at the time at a post house. And for a good 2 years, that's all I was doing. Just post. I was a PA, office PA, and then 2 months later I became an AE, and then I started editing promos. So I got really, really lucky. I moved up very fast. For 6 months I was just in that room editing promos, and I had to quit. I hated it. I was in an office all day. There were no windows in my bay. You know what I mean? The producer I worked with was very difficult to work with. And so I quit, despite everyone telling me not to, because it was, a fantastic salary, and I was young and I should get the experience, and I quit and kind of went into the production thing full time. And, I think a few months after that was when we got our first client through a pitch actually, this is the one place where my university did pay off. It was a connection from someone we knew at school, and they had given us a reference to pitch on a Mattel job for Hot Wheels. And we had pitched, and we spent days on this deck. I mean, just days making it perfect. And they called us. They said, hey, let's talk. So we pitched our idea to them, and that was our first kind of big client. We're like, okay, this is it. We're going to make it. And suddenly, you're directing something. There's 30 people in there. And the biggest crew I've ever been in charge of is, at that time, up until that point, were my college buddies, 5 of us, and a 1 or 2 talent. So that was just the school of hard knocks for it was brutal those first few days, and just getting in the swing of things. And then it became kind of more and more natural. While we were doing that, we were shooting things kind of on the side, documentaries, just taking every chance we had, keeping our eyes just peeled and looking for any chance to shoot something that might help make, again, this is all us not knowing what we're doing, right? We're just chasing. We don't even know really what we're chasing or the method or how to do it or how to get there, but we were kind of just going for it. And, one thing led to another. Several documentaries later, I'm back in Worcester.
When you were in film school, was there any projects that you were that the spark finally hit? Or even before?
Well, okay, so when I took my production 1 class, the first time I'd really picked up a camera to shoot anything, we were shooting on T2Is, I think. That was the camera at the time. And instead of them investing in a camera that where we'd actually kind of learn how to use a full camera package, they just had 30 T2Is. But I remember going out to shoot my first short with that, and I got really excited just based on what I was looking. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't want to learn. I just wanted to shoot, right? I just wanted to hold it and use it. I didn't want to take the time. But I was that really excited me. I was like, oh, that's an image I made. And so that was one of the first few sparks. And then I took a screenwriting class, and realized how bad I was at that. So there were all these kind of milestones that I hit along the way that made me realize that it takes more than just like holding the camera, right? It is really a craft. And so in that way, I think I just became privy to what filmmaking could be. And then I started paying attention to movies more, right? Now I watch everything with the subtitles on, like I'm glued. And I have just different methods and things, but I don't know. I guess you could say that was really the first I remember the exact shot too. It was my buddy Clint. We used to live by the train tracks, and I brought my buddy out to film this short. I hadn't even written anything out. It was just like, oh, it's all up here, and we jumped over, and I remember the shot. It was just I had just opened up the aperture all the way, and it was like a 50, and he's climbing the stairs of this train, and the colors came out really beautiful. I was like, oh, okay.
It's like 1/2000th shutter speed.
Yeah, it was probably awful, but I was really excited by that. It was a small little victory.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The number of filmmakers I know that have early frames that involve train tracks and trains.
Yeah, that's the default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have Super 8 footage that was shot on the train.
That's pretty metaphorical, though. Set you down on a journey, down a track, into filmmaking.
Get run over.
Chugga.
Yeah.
Air freight.
Trains leaving the station. That's really cool. So why don't you catch us up as to where you're kind of at now, what you're pursuing, where's your mindset as it relates to filmmaking?
Well, why did you even come back to
Sure.
Well, so I'm here. Yeah, so I'm here because COVID is destroying Los Angeles. Everything's shut down, and there's nothing. Productions are happening, but kind of on a larger scale. People who can afford to do it. And so I just take a few months, come back, spend some time with the family. There's no necessary exact real reason for me to be back. But on top of that, creatively, I also shot a short film in October that I've been meaning to just get to the post side of things. And so these next 2 months are that. Mm-hmm. I skipped a lot of steps between just coming back to Worcester. There was, I eventually left the partnership because over the last 3 years of me being in the partnership, I'd spent a lot of time writing, and I'd also spent it was 50% that and then 50% administrative stuff that was just feeling awful, and I kept thinking it shouldn't be a drag to come in and do a job I created for myself, right? If I did that, it means the job I created for myself is not the right job for me. And so I left, and COVID had just hit and things had really slowed down, and it's the kind of thing where we had plenty of money in the piggy bank to kind of keep going, but it wasn't servicing me anymore in a way that was conducive or fulfilling. So I left that and just continued to pursue writing. Now that's half my time is just writing features, and the other half is pursuing things to shoot. And the next big step I think for me is getting this horror short done, getting that into kind of fellowships and festivals, trying to gain some traction, and then shooting another one. Goal for this year is to do a feature film at some point, something as low budget as possible. But after getting that short done, it really opened my eyes. It can be done, 100%. You can do a feature film, absolutely, with very little resources. And I say very little resources, but I feel like I have access to all the resources, so I really don't feel like I have any disadvantage,
Yeah.
Comparatively.
Awesome. How long did it take you to shoot the short film?
Oh, it was I co-wrote it with a buddy, and we did it we started a writing group, and so we were bringing ideas to the table, and we decided to write something together. We had each brought 3 ideas and whittled it down to one, and we spent 2 months writing and rewriting and just getting it exactly to where it needed to be. That was a year and a half ago. So that had been sitting on my shelf for a while, and then eventually I brought it around. I said, okay, I'm going to do it. This is the year. I had just left the company. And I brought it, I was ready to go. I was going to self-finance and everything. It was supposed to be a month of pre-production. It ended up, because I lost my lead 2 days before to COVID. So I had to get a new lead, and so I'm up all night for 2 days straight. We had a kid.
Not like lost.
No. Like,
Just wanted to be clear.
let me clarify. She's alive.
Misplaced.
But it was a real loss because she was because she was exactly right for the role. I'd gone through hundreds and hundreds of people, and she was perfect. And so that was just awful. So in 2 days I found someone else. So it ended up really being like 2 weeks of hard pre-pro. And then we shot 1 day at a stage. It was the most ghetto bootleg stage that was falling apart, like the wall was falling down. But we had this door build out that we had in there. And we shot there for 4 hours, and then we had 3 overnights, which was brutal.
Wow.
Absolutely brutal. And we had a 11-year-old on set too.
Oh.
Yeah, and she's in 30% of the scenes, right? So she can't just leave. I can shoot as much of her stuff as I can, but some stuff it doesn't make sense to put her in.
What was more horrific, her on set or like the actual storyline?
She was fantastic.
That's good.
Yeah, she was fantastic. The parents were, like they're dance moms. They were very enthusiastic.
You were just saying it was hard because of the overnight.
Well, yeah, she had school the next day.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and her parents were like, "Oh," I'm like, "Okay, listen, it's 1 a.m. I'm trying to get her out by 2.
She's got to be on the
It's
yacht
production,
by
so
3.
things fall behind, right? And so enough things fell behind where it's 3 a.m. Okay, you're done. You can wrap. She's falling asleep in between takes, but we got it.
Unreal.
Yeah,
Well, good for you.
excited.
well done.
Very excited.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When can we expect a release?
Well, I'm hoping for a rough cut by the end of this week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's what you're working on here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andy's been in the office the last few days just working on the edit, so that's really cool. Gives us a producer credit, which is sweet. We didn't really talk about that, but that's
Yeah,
awesome.
we'll discuss.
Actually, we own it now that you came here. It's actually original IP.
You guys can
Distribution
finance
rights.
the post.
This is actually serving as legal proof. Scripted narrative is not actually how we came to know you, though. We came to know you through documentary.
Right.
How was that, Cody? You became aware of Andy first, or
Well, no,
the
Andy actually, when he came back to Worcester, just for a little bit, you were just trying to see like what the heck was going on in the film community around here,
Yeah.
and we must have just popped up online while you were searching, and so he reached out, got in contact.
Well,
with,
actually, sorry to cut you off. Trevor. You guys work with a guy? named
Yeah,
Trevor?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I went to school with his older brother and him, but I think he's a few years younger than me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always knew his older brother. His older brother's awesome, and he works in film also. So I'm guessing that's how maybe Trevor got into it. But I followed him on Instagram and saw a post he had made, and then found you guys, and then realized you guys were in Worcester, which kind of blew me away, just because there isn't that much here, right? And then I reached out to him. I reached out to him, and then he said he put my name in with you guys. And then 2 days later, I reached out to someone on Instagram, whoever handles Instagram.
probably, yeah, and Mike
Oh yeah, Mike forwarded it on. I
forwarded
remember
to me, and then we're like, yeah, man, just come on in. And Andy sent us his website and some of his work, and the thing that has now become a meme amongst us is, Andi Lipo, the guy who did the 508 bike documentary, because
He made a 508 bike documentary. That's probably why.
Right, exactly.
That's exactly why.
I kept referring to these guys as, Andy, that guy reached
Yeah,
out.
but it's Jono's fault because he kept saying who?
Yeah, he kept
Who's that?
No, I didn't say who. I knew exactly who it was.
I think when I met Jono, he's like, "Oh, Andy, the 508 bike ride."
You knew, but you were trolling Cody.
Yeah, big surprise. But point being, to me, of the work that I saw you had done, your 508 bike life documentary was awesome.
It's fantastic. Check it out. If
it was so well done, and it was
For sure.
kind of it hit a personal note with us because we're just so Worcester centric, and so much of it was shot in this neighborhood with the kids that we see
Right.
zipping up and down our roads every day.
And the way it was done. Too.
Yeah, of
And
course,
The execution
yeah.
of it was something that, I think we probably said like, oh, this is exactly how we would have told that story.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It has heart. It's soul. It's patient. We like all those things when it comes to documentary.
Yeah, so that was just something that I was eager to share with everybody when I saw it. And then you came in, we've kind of talked a lot about why the heck do we even bother with this stuff? Like, what's the point in trying to be a filmmaker and a storyteller? And maybe you can speak a little bit to that. Like, what is it? what's at the core of your motivation for doing this kind of stuff? Like if you, perfect world scenario, could do anything you wanted, what would that look like?
Creatively? Well, I'll answer the first part of that question. It feels like a burden not to do it, right? If I'm not actively doing it or at least studying it or ingesting it in some capacity, it feels like I'm burdening myself. Like I feel, it sounds a little cliche, but like I feel heavy physically. So when I'm doing it, there's some sort of relief in terms of like outcome or what I'm looking for, an ultimate, an endpoint. I couldn't really tell you. I mean, feature films is certainly in my field of view, but I don't know that I'll ever get to that point where there'll be some degree of satisfaction, because I'm also, I've seen the 508 Bike Life doc probably looks great to fresh eyes, but I look at it and I see 1,000 things I could have done differently.
Of course.
Right? Of course, as it is with everyone else. So I don't know what that looks like, but I don't really see a world in which I'm not doing it. When I finish this short film that I'm doing now, I was most likely resisting touching the edit because I was afraid, frankly. I had just not only invested, we had 15 people on set at a time, and a lot of them were favors and people that trust me, that I trust. And so not only had I invested my friends' times and my coworkers and colleagues' times, but I had also invested my own money into it. And so the risk was really high for this one to some degree. And I was scared to touch the edit for a while. I just didn't know. I didn't know. I was like, I know what I shot, but I just don't know what it looks like as a film. And I know the script is banging, right? I was very confident about that part, but it's just, there's so many stages. And I always try to express this to people. It's like to come up with a good idea and then to execute a good script and then to get it made and then to get the right cast and then to get the right crew and then to get the right performance and then to get the right edit and then to get the right sound, sound design and music and everything. It's like impossible to make something good, right? The odds are so stacked against you.
Yeah.
Why would I have made something like, who am I, to some degree? So I put it off for months. And I touched it a little bit here and there. But it was the kind of thing where I didn't commit fully to it. And so the output that I was creating wasn't good. And so that scared me even further away from it. And then I, shot a whole nother documentary, 508 Bike Life 2. More on that later. And then, and now I'm finally getting to it. And then it was just like, you have that, I was having this conversation with Jamin the other day about just like, there was that day that I just put in, I sat down, I was like, I'm going to find it. And I did. And then I got really confident with it. And then it kind of unfolded before me. And I'm like, oh, I did do something good. It's all here. It's all there. Like, I just have to trust right now. Yeah. So that hurdle from start to finish, I don't think will ever go away. And that comes with each project. And I, I'm scared to even think about, everyone's like, oh, I wish we had bigger budgets to do this. I'm like afraid now if someone's going to give me a bunch of money to do a feature, like I almost wouldn't rather have that, because that's a big stressor. To do something, and it's already so difficult. So, what was your question?
that thing that you're talking about right there, that's part of the reason why for a million years Hollywood does dailies and has dailies, because it gets you back into the, we really did that. There it is.
Yeah.
I remember when I made a feature and I didn't look at the dailies for like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then finally one night my DP was like, we have way too many dailies to go through. I'm just going to like do this giant montage for you to look at. And it literally breathed life back into me, because I'm like, there it is. I can actually see what we've been doing for the last month. Yeah. So it's like dailies are key. If the next time I direct a feature, it's going to be a big part of it.
Yeah. Being on set is like the polar opposite. Working with talent and just being there, and especially with it was just, there was so much happening all at once. You don't have time to question. And so instinct kind of takes over, and instinct is always generally a good thing. And if you've built up good instinct over the years, then you can trust in your instinct a little more. And at a certain point, it just snowballs where you're in that, that flow state. And there are some beautiful moments with the talent, with some performances that were extraordinary. And just, I don't think we did 3 overnights, and I don't think I peed once. because we were just going, and it felt good. It felt right. And at the end of it, it was me and the DP loading up the trucks, and it's 6 a.m. and we have to be out of that house by like 6:30. The owner's coming back, the house we were renting. And I was wide awake. I was like, I could go for another 6 hours if I had to. So that's something worth chasing, I think, perpetually.
Mm-hmm. That was kind of my next question. Is that the part that energizes you most, the actual making production side?
Yeah. It takes a certain, I'll say this, and I don't know if this answers your question directly. One thing I wish I did differently was more time with the talent. And I don't mean going over lines, because the script doesn't have too many lines. But I would have loved, if it wasn't COVID, to get a beer and just spend time with the talent, because that's the most important thing, from my experience at least, is getting that trust, right? You know what you want from a scene, especially if you've written it. And now it's like, okay, how do we get there? How do we trust? And how do we have that open communication? And so that was one thing moving forward, everything I do is going to involve a few weeks of just hanging out with whoever I'm working with, right? Obviously, it's very time consuming and not ideal, but there has to be that to get that open communication, to get the performance you're looking for. And that's entire basis is on trust and just like vulnerability, which is something I'm working on quite a bit as well. I don't think that answers your question either.
Well, you also said writing seems to energize you a lot, right?
Yeah, that's the biggest. Is
that even more than
writing?
Is
when I started
production?
writing 3 years ago, and I took it seriously. Like a year after that is when I really took it seriously, and I committed and tracked my time and did it every day. That is when everything changed. I started watching movies differently. I started reading differently and paying attention differently and being more critical of my work in a different way. And then there's another hurdle there, right? It's like, okay, I took 2 months to even start to edit on this because I was afraid. And now it's, okay, if I take a week off of writing and then I'm going to go back and read something that I thought was great in the moment that I'm going back to revise, there's fear that entire week, right? There's like dread almost until I get back into it. And then I find the action line or the piece of dialogue that is great. And then I can go back in. And so it's just this, I don't know, it's this perpetual cycle. But yes, writing does energize me probably the most out of all of those things.
And for when you're doing like documentaries, like the 508 bike doc, are you writing to some degree?
I write everything. Yeah. I have a paper edit of that documentary. I wrote that before I shot anything or talked to anyone. Mm-hmm. So I had talked to Addison.
You knew them?
I knew someone who I went to high school with who was kind of not in charge of, but he was like a liaison between them and the city, Addison. And I had talked to him, and he had because I found out about them first when one of them almost drove into my car in the middle of a snowstorm. That's how I found out. And I brought it up casually to a friend Addison who lives out here, and he told me all about him. And I was very upset by it. And he said, don't be, it's different, right? There's more here. Once he told me about it, I just sat down and did that. I wrote it out. Not in script format or anything, just a Google Doc. Let me just paragraph after paragraph. Okay. Let me sit with this and think about it. Okay. Let me talk to some kids. I did phone calls with the kids because I was still in Santa Monica. So I was doing these phone calls with the kids, hey, Mario, what do you want your documentary to be like? What do you want to say to people? They wrote it for me, right? In those phone calls. And then it just was a few more rewrites. And then of course, you start shooting and you're talking about 30 kids on bikes. All of that goes out the window for the most part, but the essence is all there. So everything usually for me starts with a document.
When you said you were upset, what did you mean? You mean the moment that they almost hit your car?
Yeah. Well, I was going and the kid's doing a wheelie coming at me and it's a snowstorm, right? It had just started. I can't see anything. I turn my high beams on. Doesn't help, obviously. Bad move. And then he's getting closer and I start to slow down. No way. And then he just swerves at the last second. I was like, what? An idiot. What is this guy doing? So that's how I found out about him. And I was furious then. And I was even more upset at the justification for why something like that might have happened for my friend Addison who worked with them, right? Mm-hmm. The adult who worked with them. I just couldn't get it. I was like, no, it's preposterous. Like, yeah. What if I had a child, like, let's say I'm a father and I have a kid in the back and he causes me to drive into a pole. Like, that's insane. And so we just talked. It took, several discussions for me to get over just the shock of what had happened in the street and go beyond that a little bit.
So you're having these normal adult thoughts, and
Right,
then you,
right.
but then you saw this other side,
Yeah.
and that's actually what makes for good story.
Well,
right?
I was just gonna say it's so appropriate that was where that documentary was birthed out of, because that's kind of what that documentary does for the viewer, is especially if you're familiar with this phenomenon that's in the city of Worcester, is like these kids are kind of an enigma, and in one sense they're like this menace to society because they're bombing down major roads recklessly, and it's a miracle that no one gets killed. But then, so it's just easy to be like, these are dumb kids. But then what that documentary does is it actually dives into their reasons they're doing it and what led to it and what it means to them to be able to do that. And suddenly you begin to have a whole nother level of understanding and empathy toward them, and that these are not bad kids or ill-intended. They actually have really good intentions and good hearts. And suddenly there's this and that's the beauty of a well-told story. It's what we talk about all the time. So that's what resonated with me, is it just flips your view on something really well.
Well, it stood the test of time too, because their intention, because now they have done so much more. They've partnered with this organization called Worcester Youth Co-op, and together they're like really stepped it up for COVID. So Worcester Youth Co-op does they have partnerships with pantries, right? And so what they'll do is they'll get food from these pantries during COVID, and they partner with 508 Bike Life, and they'll make these care packages, and 508 Bike Life will go that day and drop off food to people.
Courier to people.
Yeah. And so they've created
that's
this
so
network,
cool.
which is fascinating.
Is that part of the second doc?
Yeah, there's
awesome.
Yeah, and they they have a hydroponic farm now, so they're
Spoiler.
growing their own vegetables. And so it's like a big. I actually just shot this interview a few days ago. A big part of it is like everything we do, even in response to COVID, but just in general, when it requires like funding or community outreach, takes so much time, right? We have to go through this bureaucracy, or we have to apply for grants. It takes forever. And it's like, here you have these 12-year-olds on bikes, and they're delivering food in real time today, right? If you need something, and there's no question, there's no like, I mean, is it the safest? I don't know, but that's, the point remains is that they're being much more efficient than some bureaucratic system that's going to take forever to get funding, to get these systems in play, to get the resources to the community.
See, I've been saying we need to go back to child labor. I'm just kidding. For those of you out there that don't know my sense of humor,
It's a joke.
I have
It's a joke.
I have 5 boys, and I do make them work all the time at home.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah, and that's good.
So what I was trying to ask earlier, which you did touch upon, but maybe I can rephrase it, is what to you is the power of storytelling? Like, what as a tool, as an agent of change, like what is it about storytelling that makes it powerful?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, when anybody's like, "Hey, dude, I heard about. Oh my God, did you see this documentary on Netflix?" Whether it's a serial killer or whatever, like, anytime anybody hits you up about anything, it's usually some sort of content they've consumed, and I think that speaks for itself. Just to like break it down on a granular level, it's easy to ingest. You just sit there and you watch, and then you form your own probably ridiculous opinions, and then take your bias and bring it to somebody else, and then whatever. But the point remains is that its ability to kind of spread is fantastic, and no one wants, especially nowadays, I feel like people read less and less. I know I'm guilty of it, and I try and be on top of it, but it's it takes time. It takes time and focus and energy, versus relaxing and sitting a movie, which you would do to unwind anyways. So I think that there's just an accessibility to it that surpasses a lot of different things besides memes, of course. And so it works as a way to communicate. It just works. It works great. And if you can get really good at it, it can work really, really great. And once you get to that point, it's like that's when you kind of become liberated as an artist. It's like I'm getting through to people in a way that I can't do from sitting here and talking to you, or like pointing you to a news article or whatever. You just have to watch this, right? That's very liberating. So that's really it for me.
Yeah. We talk about all the time how storytelling is just inherently powerful, for good or for bad, and it's all in the hands of the
Yeah.
storyteller. Do you guys have any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I think a lot of young people who haven't made a living in filmmaking have that question of like, how do I even make money? And you know, I'm just thinking about the number of people out there that want to make it a career, quote unquote. Can you speak to some of your journey? You've touched on some of your story of how you got to where you're actually making money of it, but maybe we can just riff for a minute or two about that part of it, you know, sort of living paycheck to paycheck and what kind of gigs you have to take in the beginning just to make it.
You got to be poor for a while. You know, it's especially for me, I went to Los Angeles and it's crazy expensive there. So you have to just be poor for a while. But the biggest hurdle, even beyond just being poor and taking every PA job or whatever you can get, is figuring out what part of it you want to do. The reason why I can do so many things is because I failed and then did it again and then switched because I got kind of over that part of it. And then, right. So, but it took me 7 years to get to the point where I'm like, oh, I want to write and I want to make films, right? In which capacity, that doesn't matter. But I those are the two things I want to do. I want to sit down and write pages and I want to make films. I love narrative films. I love documentary. It took me so long to get there. I had a career as an editor. I started a production company. I was producing, right? I had, we were doing like the banking and everything for the company. And then we were hosting directors. The directors were coming in and trying to sell themselves to us. Like I remember at one point, this guy came in with his Alka-Seltzer commercial and he's like, look, I'm great. And I was just remember watching it and thinking, I don't care at all about this, right? I don't care that you did this. I was 27 and he was, you know, in his 40s. And it clicked at that moment. I was like, that's great, you know, and it's, you know, it's good that it's for you. Why are you in here pitching? Like, I didn't even feel like I should be in the same room with this guy. And not even because the quality of words, whatever, it was great, but I just didn't care about that, you know? And so have been so many instances of like, why am I in this room editing this? Is it just for money? Yes. Okay. That's not going to work, right? So I switch over. Why am I in this room listening to this guy pitch himself to me when I don't even have the client base for myself? Don't know. Next, right?
It sounds like what you're saying is, you know, that it's incredibly valuable to have self-awareness and keep checking and adjusting.
Yeah.
Like do a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
Get better at a lot of different things. Yeah. And then the money will come later. Just like.
Absolutely. And you'll know when you're in the right place. When I finished my first feature film, I stepped back and I was like, whoa, you know, that was different. That experience is different. Okay. I'm going to keep doing that until it continues to feel more and more right. And then you get to a point where you're just like lock into place with the right place. And then, you know, of course you have to do that. Don't get me wrong. Make money, do the things you need to do to make a living, do all of it. But continue to transition to things that make more sense to you in a way that isn't financial necessarily. And that's it. And have fun.
Yeah. It sounds like you're talking a lot about what I would describe as passion, discovering what is that thing that really, really gets you out of bed in the morning to do it and beyond money.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember you were telling me that a big reason why you had to move on, make your latest transition was that you felt passionless, right?
Right.
So talk a little bit about that. Like what is it now for you to take all that time that you described, you laid out that whole process to make any kind of film, to commit yourself to that process? What are the things that project has to have or offer?
I don't know. It's like a piece of you in every single project, right? And so it's like the question becomes, how big is that piece of you in this project? And if it's big enough, and I mean a piece of you, I mean like, even if you're getting down to a subconscious level of like, I'm doing this documentary or this short film, but it's me I'm putting into it, and not sweat equity, but I mean, it's like my subconscious and my trauma and just like just becoming a better human is going into this fantasy story that I have. So how much of you is in this project or this project? And you'll know, because then as you move forward with it, you'll be more and more obsessive and you get to the point where you get tunnel vision and you're just like, you're sick by it, literally. And it's all you're going to be doing. I think that's it. How big of a piece of you is in each project. And that's, again, this is me in my transition phase still. So this is where my head is at. I know that you can do things that you can disassociate from but still work hard on for somebody else and still take pride in, right? I'm just talking about the projects where, I mean, I haven't gotten paid for my documentaries. I haven't gotten paid for my writing. I haven't gotten paid for my narrative at all. $0. I've netted $0. None of those things have made me money yet, but I still do them. So it's just a part of unpacking for me, just unpacking myself. Why am I pursuing this? And then, then you find bits and pieces, especially when it comes to life on screen. You've already shot something and then you see it and you're like, oh, that's actually something. That's like behavior I've engaged in when I was 16, or like something that happened in my life, right? That you don't even realize. So it's just, I don't know, it's just a lot of unpacking.
When you were editing feature film trailers, did that make you want to make features differently than Hollywood, or did it?
Yeah.
Like, tell me about what that did to you emotionally or psychologically.
It was just so fast. Like the trailers nowadays are so fast that I couldn't even grasp onto what I was doing. And it's like first of all, I will say I'm very thankful that I did that crash course, because I became an editor in that room for sure. The editor I am today. It was incredibly useful. But there were moments where I was so detached from the content I was putting together, the pieces of the puzzle that I was putting together, that there was it was just empty. I was droning on. I was just operating, right? I wasn't even necessarily making art, although maybe you could argue that I was, but to me, it felt like just operating. I'm operating the camera. I'm not the DP, so to speak. And so that just got to a point. And also, you could also talk about the movies too. I mean, you look at something that really spent $150 million and it doesn't make you feel any type of way. And I know that's not for everyone, right? But it just makes you think about what you could get away with for like a couple $100,000. Right. It's this insane perspective shift where it's like, and again, even a couple $100,000 scares me. Like, I don't want that liability because I know how hard this is. But it definitely, it wakes you up a little bit. But then you get to set with your tiny little budget for your short and you're like, damn, I really could use like 2 more grips, 4 more PAs.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways.
Well, our slogan here is meaningful stories. That's kind of what motivates us. And the way that we've come to define it, I think it's a fluid definition, but meaning, a meaningful life, meaningful work, meaningful stories are stories that are outward flowing. So they're just as much about helping others as they are your own advancement. How do you feel about that definition of meaning, and what does it mean? I think for work to be meaningful for you, what's that like?
Yeah. The 508 Bike Life doc was very meaningful and impactful for the kids. A lot of people saw it. I mean, you can go through the YouTube comments and you'll see a lot of awful, haters and racists too. But it meant a lot to the kids. They did screenings. They did multiple screenings and people went. And when I went back to do the next one, 40 new kids there, and they saw me and they're like, let's go, let's do this. So it meant something. And then, I don't know, but I can also be selfish, right? I'm doing this for me. When I started, I was doing it for me. And I was like, I want to do something that will advance my career. I want to do this for me. So I don't know what that balance is or what point I'm coming from, but there's definitely an outward flow of energy that will be beneficial for everyone, everyone that's involved.
Sounds like we need a documentary about the story of Andi Lipo creating the 508 bike documentary.
It'd be called Andi Lipo, the guy who made the 508 bike life documentary.
Yeah, but it's like the character arc of like starts out selfish and, self-absorbed person, and then grows into this, community oriented person that's just passionate and
there you go.
I don't want to write your story for you, but
You kind of just.
But I'm surprised you're not writing this down.
Can you ride wheelies?
Hell no. It's really hard.
It is really hard.
A wheelie is really hard. It's really difficult.
Well, before we wrap, is there anything else you guys want to touch on?
Oh, I guess I think we hit it. It's a pleasure to speak to a fellow artist, and especially one that's here in Worcester, and looking forward to doing more work with you. And
For sure.
And you're very articulate, and you're very self-aware, so it's a privilege.
Yeah. Thank you.
Where can people find you, find your work, all that good stuff?
AndiLipo.com.
Just that? No Instagram, no
I'm
social?
not very active, unfortunately.
Okay.
That's another part of
Spell it for people.
what?
Your website.
ANDILIPO.com.
Cool. And when can we expect 508 Bike Life #2 and your short to come out?
I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Well,
TBD.
We'll keep
TBD.
our people aware of that too.
Does your short have a name?
Don't sleep.
Don't sleep.
Yeah. But the don't is crossed out.
Whoa.
So really it's sleep?
Sleep.
Question mark?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Don't sleep ?
Well, with that cliffhanger, we'll wrap it up, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you guys.
man.
Thank you.